Thousands of stars you see when you look up at the night sky, every one of them living in between two collapses. An initial collapse of a dark stellar gas cloud to form the star, and a final collapse of a luminous star on the way to the ultimate fate.
Yet another guy I know who is also a unique character. Vince Easley is with me. Now, Vince has been around the show ever since we started, basically. I've co-hosted with Vince. I've talked to Vince. And nowadays, quite honestly, I've produced things with Vince, all kinds of stuff. He's on the supporters page at Ocelli.com and has been a friend of the show since its inception. And despite some of the differences I've had with various people in the alt media world, Vince has remained my friend throughout, and I appreciate that. But today we're going to talk to him because we need, a follow-up on the story we were following a few weeks back, where the trial of the Bundys and the individuals who were connected to the initial Bundy Ranch thing that went down in 2014, and also connected to the Malfour bird refuge deal that went on up there in the Northwest, right? All those trials and those things having been dismissed mostly, except for a couple of people that didn't really make headlines. People like Jason Patrick still sitting in a cell. All of that going on. We wanted to follow up with Vince and find out what was happening, and it turned out that he was present at the Vegas trial. Now, when we spoke to Vince, he was on the witness list and maybe being asked to leave the courtroom. And in fact, I even got to see a video of him on Facebook where there was a guy sounding the alarm, blowing a horn, and Vince trying to explain what was going on the street right outside of the courthouse. And he has been continuing to follow this story, be part of this story, physically on the ground there, not only during the trial, but at the initial standoff in 2014. Vince was there as a member of the press, basically under the banner which he had flying over his tent for UCY.TV. But also, Vince can be heard on places like Real Liberty Media and et cetera, et cetera. Of course, he's going to bring up some of those people, I'm sure, during this discussion. But first, let's find out how Vince is doing. How you doing tonight, man?
Hey there, Chuck. Doing great. I was just adding a little post over here on Facebook. So, yeah, live now on the OcelliEffect.com. And I'm going to post that.
Do appreciate that, man. And of course, Vince has always been supportive and promoting the show as well. But like I said, last we left you, you're over there at the courthouse and you were added to the witness list because you had a particular piece of testimony you could offer regarding the situation in 2014. Then you were asked to leave the courtroom. Now, there's been quite a few things that have happened since then. And we even had the possibility that we might find out about maybe somebody having been injured while in custody. And it looks like maybe some people are no longer in custody. What's actually happened since that time when you were asked to leave the courtroom, Vince?
Well, that's a good long story. So I stood up at that time and raised my left hand up in the air. And stood. I had hoped and intended to make a bit of a statement that I'm in fact continuing to witness and part of the press. And it's funny because come along a little later, there's a piece from NPR, National Public Radio, and an interview with Tay Wiles from High Country News, and it has, well, I'll just quote a little bit, identifying themselves as media. And so I'm in the description there, internet radio. I'm the only one there doing that. And it goes on with a little more description of far right-wing conspiracy theory, la-ti-da. So I thought it was pretty good that at least I was identified. So that's pretty neat in a way. Also, I have a little more commentary. I did a WordPress on that, so I'll share that link a little bit.
Sure, absolutely share that link. But also, they didn't name you directly, but they seem to describe you a bit. because from an outsider's perspective, I guess you're on the far right wing. Of course, I know you a little better than that. I know you have some right wing leanings. You have some left wing leanings. Quite honestly, you're an independent thinker. So, but you would be the only guy that could be there identifying himself as press for internet radio, with the exception of another guy who always gets named, who was at both events and all that kind of stuff. But you're certainly the guy that they're talking about in that description. So,
and I've talked a lot of the mainstream media out there, and I've rather enjoyed it too. And of course, connecting voices, that's my skill. I'm talking to Maxine Bernstein, and I hope I won't be out of place in saying that. I'll just say that the next thing that I will say to her is I will, I laugh at myself. So my video skills are only the only thing worse is actually my writing, and it pains. Honestly, it pains me to write. It takes 45 minutes to write a paragraph, and it's because English is my second language. Okay, I speak American and that with Southern inflection and thinking. And there's a lot to words, and sometimes they're taken out of context. But as I say, my skill lies in networking people and on the street or any situation. I've never met a stranger. I can just walk right in. I like people, so that's the bonus there.
Well, that is certainly part of your skill set, but let's get to the particulars here because, like I said, you were being asked to leave the courtroom as a witness, and then what happened next? Because they didn't want your testimony or your potential testimony tainted. Well, did you actually end up testifying? I mean, were you called in? And what has happened since with the proceedings that you know of, too? So
the reason I'm excluded is because I'm on the exclusionary list. And that's a list of, 1,045 people or something like that. Anyways, just over 1,000 people. I feel like I don't know, but most of those people ain't going to be called, obviously. But I think that that I would probably be called. Jason Patrick, myself, and Ammon Bundy would be the relevance to my testimony. For, I guess, other than hearsay, because, a lot of people were there and seen things, but this gives me privy information. And what is at the root of this, now, is the aggressors, which was the government agencies. Now, the FBI did a threat assessment. Let me start with that. They said the Bundys are not a threat. So Dirty Dan Love, he's got a lot of backdoor dealings, and, he's not a very nice guy. If you really look at some of the things he's done, he wanted to have a big old shoot him out like the OK Corral or something is what my opinion is. And he ramped up stuff instead of backing off. On April the 11th, it was supposed to. They were leaving, right? When Gillespie came up on the 12th, that Saturday, and he said, I just got word the cows have been released and this and that. So this is what we're looking at is who set it up, right? And
well, Gillespie's the sheriff. Gillespie's the sheriff. Who is Dirty Dan Love, though?
He was the agent in charge, special agent in charge of the operation, BLM cattle gather, they called it. Gold Butte was the operations, was the handle they put on it there. Now, they had also, these are like elite teams like you would see in a war zone overseas, but it demonstrates very well the occupation that we live under, and that these are the oppressors, and they're coming out of jurisdiction. And this is what's coming forth, is that lack of jurisdiction. And beyond that, how it was a setup. So I like to call it the stalking horse. It's the false front, and this is the premise that we're going in there to save the tortoise, which in fact they gathered many and then destroyed thousands. I don't have the right number here, but so it's the tortoise two-step, and they've come in there to run people off the land. We can go back several decades and see that same old pattern. It's just theft. And
well, right. Under the guise of environmental protection and attempting to protect a limited species or endangered species, they activated certain elements connected to the Bureau of Land Management in order to, curtail the activities of the Bundys, because it was supposedly detrimental to the land itself and some of the animals that occupy it in a natural sense. This is part of the equation that came in. But again, I want to pick up the story with you had been witness to a particular incident which they thought they might call you to testify for. But again, like you adequately mentioned here, there is usually a large witness list which is entered for possible witnesses to be called. The majority of them were not called. Have you been called to testify yet in in an official capacity?
No, not been subpoenaed. I have talked to Dan Hill, and so over this, we're on break now for all this weekend, next week, and on till December the 11th, which will be on a Monday. There's going to be a lot happening between now and then, and I'd like to tell you that I will not be surprised if this is even kicked out by then. If not then, after the 19th of December, Larry Klayman, he will be on the 19th of December. He will be in D.C. and he has a lawsuit there for, first of all, stopping the trial, and then furthermore to vacate the charges. That's not the right words, but dismiss it all.
Well, is he taking it? Is he taking it to a higher court under the premise that an accused is guaranteed a speedy trial? Is that what he's doing, or is there something else that's going on?
Well, I won't give any details because I'm not prepared to do that. But I'll tell you what I'll do. I will gather the information and bring it back to you that we could include it in the publication here after this is gone out into the ether forever.
Oh, look, absolutely. We'll include any links that you have that are to serve informational purposes to back up some of what's going on. So let's go back to your perspective here, because again, look, you're not a legal scholar. You're certainly not a constitutional scholar exactly. I mean, you have a grasp of many documents and things, but in an official way, someone would not go to you as a point of reference on these things. Let's talk about your perspective, because there you are the expert. So what happens here? They put you out of the courtroom, and you're on the witness list. You still have not been subpoenaed. None of your testimony has been offered into evidence directly by you. What else has gone on in the meantime? Because during the break, I'm sure there's going to be some legal wrangling here to try and get more charges dismissed. Any defense attorney of any sort would be attempting to do that right now, regardless of the situation. But what has actually gone on? I mean, I did see a post out there stating that Ammon Bundy is now no longer in custody. Is that correct?
Right. That is right. So let's go ahead and jump ahead, and then we'll back up a little bit. So today, Ryan Payne has been released, and he's was president of the 3 Percenters up in Montana, and he came there to serve as a buffer, and it was a stand in the gap type of deal. Let's look at how things were really happening at the time. So, quite contrary to the state's case, which is unraveling. Thank you, Sherry Duvall, Readout News. I'll bring that link along too. She's been a great source. They were in there, and they came in with, militarized. It was like a strike team, right? They're surrounded. The Bundys, they're in fear of their life and call out for help. Somebody help, And this is the American way. What we saw go on there. So the BLM, the whole operation was supposed to be in stand down on the 11th. The next day, they've escalated and come barred the way after Gillespie. So it wasn't really a standoff with the federal government, right? It was a demonstration to the sheriff of Clark County, Nevada here, Doug Gillespie, to do his job. Cliven, what he said to, hey, let's we give them, an hour and 20 minutes now. And so we're going to go out there and turn the cows loose. Let's be safe. I've got video up. You can listen to his very words. Let's be safe. Let's go down there and shut the interstate down, because there's going to be a lot of people going down there, right? We met the highway patrol. I was there in the middle. And about the time I'm shaking like a dog, boy, chatting tax, I'll just say it that way. Somebody hollered out, they've got them pinned down under the bridge. And in a mass exodus day the people went down, and what had happened was they had their SWAT team, and they was all drawn up in firing positions on people down there that had come down to let the cows go. So then we'll skip back ahead now. Ryan Payne released today, and yesterday Ammon Bundy was released. Cliven Bundy, he was offered, Judge Gloria Navarro, she said everybody in this tier, which there's been one tier before, now this tier, now one tier to follow. Cliven Bundy says he refused terms. He said he'll not leave until every man is released. And so there's another tier past this one that is awaiting a trial and has been and those guys been locked up for the last couple of years. And I might have to eat some words of my own here. I'm not, I started one position and switched and come back around in my thinking. But Brian Cavalier, let's see what really happens with this man right here. He was Cliven Bundy's bodyguard through it all, and I took him to be an honorable man, and then started hearing things like maybe he's going to be the main witness and against Cliven. So I'm just not sure, and I'm gonna redact and reserve my opinion here, because he's still locked up. Him with O'Shaughnessy and two more of Cliven's sons, Dave and Mel Bundy. And these guys, well, Dave Bundy, he was, they threw him to the ground, took his laptop, arrested him, then had no charges and turned him loose out on the streets of Las Vegas. And it's just been a big, serious abuse by black-booted thugs.
Well, let's get to some particulars here, because you said Ryan Payne had been released and Ammon Bundy had been released. What were the terms that they accepted? I mean, are we talking about a bail and electronic bracelet? Are we talking about charges being reduced? I mean, is there any details you can impart about what circumstances they were released under?
Absolutely. So Ryan Payne had to have approval from Judge Anna Brown up in Oregon, from the Portland district of the U.S. D.C. courts that are operating here. This ninth district that is really an outlaw. It's rogue justice. But anyway, so he has to get all approved through her, because he accepted a plea deal up there for what was it? Threat against law enforcement, federal law enforcement.
Well, they would have had to give him a consideration like similar to probation, where if you're under a probationary time period, that means that any other offense or whatever, or any other legal procedure would also consider your probation. That was part of his agreement, I guess, with having the majority of the charges dismissed up there. Is that right?
He's still looking at 3 years up there under the sentencing guideline for and recommendations. But he's also, though, made a motion to withdraw his guilty plea. Of course, he took his plea, and then Ammon and Ryan Bundy and some other folks were found not guilty up there. They weren't found guilty, that is, and there's always seems to be one holdout. This is one person in the jury, and that's what we seem trying to resist, but come back with no charges. Now, the second trial up in Oregon, of course, our good friend Jason Patrick, he'll be sentenced here, right, coming up here in January. Some people have been sentenced yesterday as well. So a year and a day. That's what we're seeing up there, and I would expect that Jason probably might be looking at some of the same. So anyways, on down here to Vegas, it's approved. He'll be out into like a halfway house sentence or situation, that is, with the ankle bracelet and monitoring and restriction to movement and so forth. Now, Ryan Bundy, of course, he was first granted his freedom and to a halfway house, and since that's even been relaxed, the restrictions taken off. He's allowed to actually be at home and split his time, actually back home in Bunkerville and here in Vegas, so back and forth. And went home for the holidays. Ammon Bundy has gone home for the holidays, and then his restrictions are a little tighter, but they'll be loosened as well. As it's being evidenced, the state's prosecution is falling apart. It's
well, regardless of the trajectory of the state's prosecution, at this point, what you're telling me is that some of these guys have been released under a supervised sort of program where they will be monitored during the time of the trial, at least until the completion of the trial or sentencing occurs. They've been given some level of freedom back, but they're still facing the same charges, it looks like to me so far. Has there been any change in the level of charges? Because these guys have sat in cells for a very long time over this, and seems to me almost odd that they're granting them even any form of liberty at this point. But has there been any change in the charges that you know
of? No change in charges thus far, but I think we are seeing perhaps future charges against the state. This is a prosecutionary misconduct, and this is why the release, because it's been shown that the state has not only been less than forthcoming, but has been very deceptive in hiding the information, even telling Ryan Bundy that he was on a fishing expedition and laughed at him because he's saying, look, I want these tapes. I know they exist, and they got to be evidence of them. And he says, look, I can't keep up with this back and forth. I expect my motions to be taken serious. I mean, it's been talk about a fishing expedition. It's like trying to pull up Moby Dick, I guess, to drag this out of them because they have hidden it. For instance, in the medical, all right, let me back up just a little bit. All the information about this case from the government side is if you had like 4 super good computers that had all these terabytes, it'd take 4 of those to contain all of this. You'd have to have 4. Now, inside of all that, they've got like medical records and so forth. And for instance, they buried a little bit of, inside these terabytes, a little bit of information over here hidden away. I mean, so a person has to go through. Can you imagine going through all these files? And this is what the defense has been up against. And it's showing now more and more that it's quite obvious that it's a frame up, it's a setup.
This is sadly, this is the way the court system functions anymore, is that they overwhelm you with discovery information. And realistically, unless you have the ability to hire several people to sort through the data, you're never going to get to the bottom of all the things that they have in evidence. Whether they decide to use it or not is even another consideration. But fascinating you bring up tapes here. Tapes of what exactly is he in search of? Would this be the tapes of the communications on the ground between different assets during the standoff? Is that what he's in search of, or is there other recordings?
Yeah, that and a great deal more. If we look at the first, for instance, there's a surveillance camera that's set out, one at least in several more, but one in particular that was surveilling the Bundy's home. It had great capability. It had, it's very, very high tech. So they were, first of all, denying that the camera even existed. That was proven. Ryan Bundy he's been amazing. He's actually leading the defense for the lawyers, and they come in and back him up and build on it. And Mr. Whipple doing a great job. All the great team in there. So, anyways, they find out, yes, there was a camera, and then they say, oh, it was only transmitting live feed to one monitor. Nobody was recording, and nobody was taking notes and so forth, and that was shown to be a lie. And furthermore, that it was being streamed to several locations, and including back to D.C. That's alleged at this point, I think, but I think that would prove out as well.
It would seem almost foolish to assume that if they're using some level of surveillance on the situation, not only to assure, say, the safety of their agents, let's think about this objectively, but also to collect additional evidence. They would certainly want to collect it, not simply live stream it, so they could keep assets that are far away well informed, but they would certainly want to memorialize it in some way. And what you're telling me is they're denying first that they had surveillance, and now they're denying that they've recorded it. But that seems highly unlikely, a suspect assertion that an agency like this would take the time to set up surveillance and not keep a record of it. Seems absolutely ridiculous. So I don't even understand where that's coming from. So just logically speaking, I mean, Ryan's got a point here. There is no way that they would have not memorialized some of this information. The idea that nobody took notes, well, maybe they didn't, because if you have a recording, you can take notes at any time, any which way you want, and you don't need notes. You have the recording. So all you need really is verifiable excerpts of it to illustrate any point in court or ever after in an investigative, capacity, right? So this makes no sense that they would deny that they didn't have surveillance or that they recorded it. So that's kind of crazy. But so these guys have been released, still pending the trial happening, and they're on break at the moment, like you said. I wonder about that. Now, when you said this individual is going to D.C. to try and plead a case somewhere, I mean, what you don't know the details about that. We'll get them later. But it seems to me like you could logically make an argument that I'm not receiving a speedy trial if I were one of the defendants, that I am not being afforded full discovery, which is also incumbent upon the prosecution to provide in a criminal case to the defense. It seems, you're not allowed surprise witnesses as the prosecution in most jurisdictions in this country, nearly all, if I understand the law correctly. So it seems like they're battling procedural problems as well as evidentiary, well, let's just call it resistance, when it comes to the prosecution providing their keystones of evidence. And they're also doing the overwhelming sort of thing of, hey, listen, we're going to declare a witness list of more than 1,000 people. I guarantee you they're not going to call 1,000 witnesses. They're going to stipulate to certain things and say, listen, I've got 5 more guys that are going to say the very same thing this person did, and therefore you'll have redundancy cut out of the evidentiary record and the testimonials. So it seems to me like they're sort of overwhelming it by a massive data that, again, makes it extremely difficult for somebody to defend against. But this is the nature of the court system. And especially when you want to make an example out of somebody, you're going to put in extra effort, let's say, to overwhelm their defense team with these kinds of tactics. Now, you also had commented last time we had you on about the behavior of the judge. Now, with the judge probably being the one who ruled on whether to allow some of these guys to have a little bit of their freedom back, seems like that position might be lightening up a little bit. But do you see any other progress as far as the judge here that you've been able to notice? Again, you were removed from the courtroom, so you haven't been able to go back in yet lately, have you?
Right. But yes, absolutely. Her position outwardly certainly has changed. Let me stop just for a moment. Back up on that camera. It has SD capability, so you're not going to. I mean, game wardens put up a game cam on a poacher or whatever. That's all recorded. You're not going to tell me that's not on a chip. But also over in the Real Liberty Media chat over here, Meister Brow, yes, thank you very much. It's all exculpatory evidence and all buried up in that metadata. And no, they did not waive the right to a speedy trial. There's no right's been waived. Ryan Bundy is challenged and stands. Oh shoot, I forget the name. Something Priori. But anyways, in challenge. Now skipping forward to Judge Navarro. Back to that. When I was in there, she is a very well. Her personality is nice. She's a nice demeanor and a pretty lady to look at. Just when she gets behind out behind from the courtroom, that's when she really started checking her stuff off there. She's been noticed to be reading kind of like off a script and really doesn't pay any attention to sometimes just like she didn't even hear an objection. And even later on went to say not to object in front of the jury and, kind of come to a sidebar and then a sidebar, and, ignored on that. But here just a while back, this is somebody told me here that Sessions, I haven't checked it, Sessions had said something about these federal judges are going to have to start standing by the Constitution. And the very next day, Ryan Bundy gives a Constitution class to the jury into the courtroom. And prior to that, you could not even walk in the courtroom with a pocket Constitution sticking in your shirt pocket. You'd had to turn it around. And people had been stopped for that. And this was like the norm. So the mood started really changing, and when it started becoming very obvious that the state was just so crooked in all of this that she started having to make some kind of concession. She's doing the CYA, I'm pretty sure. At first I said, so she was, making sure like Ryan Bundy was kind of schooled almost in a little bit of ways. That she wanted to make sure it didn't come to a mistrial. I guess she could cover herself on that end. But then I started thinking,
interesting
CYA.
Listen, interesting you bring that up because every judge in any court does not appreciate when their rulings are overturned for any reason. So a lot of them will seek to insulate themselves from that in a procedural way. But unfortunately, some of what you just described there sounds to me like automatically we have all sorts of examples of procedure if the court reporter, is keeping good track of this through stenography. Hey, we may have a bunch of things procedurally. If you're ignoring the procedure that you set forth, listen, bring your objections to a sidebar, do not argue them in front of the jury, and then you're ignoring the call for a sidebar during certain discussions, it seems to me like she's setting herself up to be overturned if she's doing that on a regular basis. Again, this is my editorialization here, because that is one of the things that makes a judge's ruling quite vulnerable. If it seems as though you violated somebody's ability to participate fully in their own defense, I mean, it's a core value of court procedure in the United States. I know this in any court procedure, this is the case. So that's interesting, but I want to bring you back once again to, where you've been at with this, because what happened after, again, you were kind of put out. I know that you obviously network with people. This is one of your skills, but and you've been keeping up with everybody. What is the general mood? I mean, again, interesting that Cliven Bundy did not want to make a deal regarding getting his own personal freedom because he feels as though everybody should be allowed that before he is. Kind of an interesting statement about that particular man right there, I would say, and something that I don't want lost in this discussion. But since we are seeing that, they're not trying to keep them in cages the whole time, and it sounds to me like a little bit of an argument from a philosophical point of view was allowed to be entered into the record. Is there any sense that you're getting from everybody involved here that that they're feeling like the tide is changing in some way, or are we pretty much confronted with business as usual and they're going to have to just fight the good fight? No,
the good fight. It's, man, it is really I don't know the words to put into it. It's just so awesome to see how this is working. Now, let me say, there's a lot of good people here. You was talking earlier about, the expense of the lawyers and so forth, but there's a lot of people working behind the scenes that are very, very intelligent. Roger Root, he's filed some motions. Those have to be heard too. There's people in there that are taking the notes. John Lamb, he gives the live updates for. If you don't know who he is, then I'll bring a suggestion along. There's people reporting like Sherry Duvall from Readout News. There's Doug Knowles with Matters How You Stand. A lot of more people behind the scenes that are working very, very hard. So it's been a really big concerted effort. Now, when I had to leave the courtroom, where I went, as I've been out front. Pitch in on setting up signs, not the muscle. There's a lot of great folks out there doing that, making sure that's getting done for the support out there. So from there, there's a lot of people that will relay to me what's going on in the court. Even a little inside information is coming my way, and I appreciate those sources. And also I've bounced back and forth inside the courthouse. I can go upstairs and outside the courtroom, but not inside. Now, the other day I went up there because the jury left out and they were hearing a motion, and I think, well, I was told, I could be inside for that. And I went up there, and the marshal said, well, we're not telling you you can't. You want to talk to a lawyer and make sure, that you wouldn't be excluded then from being a witness. So, I said, okay, well, I ain't going in. But I have gone up and caught some folks coming out, and a lot of good conversation. The marshals. Let me say this first of all, or right now, I guess, not first of all, but those guys working up there, the marshal service inside the courthouse, they're all like retired Metro and different positions throughout government, law enforcement, and so forth. Kind of like old school guys. They're real calm. Professional and polite and helpful where they can be, and candid in a lot of things. And I'd have a pretty long conversation, talk about some of the things that they've said to me. It was very, very enlightening and interesting. One man said, I was wearing an Oath Keeper shirt, and he said, what does the back of your shirt say? And he turned around and he says, I took that oath to uphold and defend the Constitution from enemies, both foreign and domestic. So I'm not being any kind of smart aleck to any of those folks, and actually, extending the hand and hoping to create a bridge. And thank you, Kara Young, Bridge. She's off radio for now and otherwise occupied, but a great friend and somebody else I've worked with in radio. But go ahead.
Right, yeah, Kara Young's been on here also in the past. I haven't had her on in quite a while, but I haven't seen her around, so that's why. Anyway, back to what's going on, though. I mean, going forward, do we have any indication, though, that this is going to be a speedy trial? I mean, it sounds to me like the whole situation is quite a bit buried in procedure still, because there's a bunch of motions that are going to have to be dealt with regarding the evidence, regarding discovery, regarding, I guess, procedural problems here. Again, in the area of discovery, this overwhelmingly large, tremendous, really, witness list seems to me like a lot of things are going to have to be handled before we actually get into the real meat of the trial, the actual evidence itself. And, is there a sense, though, because I know you're familiar with the families of some of these guys. I know you're familiar with some of the other players who were kind of tangential to the situation. I mean, does anybody have an overall view of what they expect to have happen here, or what they believe the end game is here? I mean, is there the idea that they're just trying to minimize damage as far as conviction, or do they believe that they'll find a path to acquittal here, or will this be something that's going to have to be dealt with on appeal? I mean, has any of that been indicated to you by anybody connected directly to these men?
Yeah. Like I said, and I do. First of all, let me say that I do keep private things, and so I won't.
Oh no! Look, Vince, I'm not a. No. I'm not asking you to violate any confidences. I don't want you to. Well, hold on. I don't want you to violate any confidences. I just want to get a general sense if there's, sort of an agreement, something that you could come up with that you could explain to people about, what the attitude is generally. Certainly don't want you to violate any particular confidences. I keep those myself and wouldn't expect you to. Go ahead.
I got you. So let me line this out here. There is a very strong syndicate that this is not even going to go to the jury, but more importantly, if it does go to the jury, they are seeing what's going on. It's inside the courtroom, the judge saying things like, "You don't need to know that." They're asking a lot of questions, right? So they're informed. They're informing themselves, but they are being restricted to what they can know a lot. So a lot of stuff has been taking place outside of the jury's presence. And we started with a delay in the trial, first of all, more motions, and then stop and start. And the jury, when they're getting kicked out, right, they're like, well, because, they're not stupid because they know why the court is stopping, and they're being removed because of the questions and this and that being brought forth. And then to boot, also their questions that are not being answered. And if you're listening right now, Sal the Grandma, thanks for the retweets and the other folks over there getting some good engagement over on Twitter and with the posting of this show right now. And also for the now back to the subject. As far as if there was a conviction and they had to go to appeals, there's a lot to base that on, let me say. And I think it would certainly be overturned. But I don't think, honestly, I think it's not even going to go to the jury at this point. A lot of the people that are on the inside that are working together in legal aspects. And we've got some, people that are volunteering their time as attorneys, too. And Larry Clayman, for one, and like I said, Jerry Root and some others there. Great minds working, and not costing the millions and millions of dollars, but it is racking up legal fees and whatever cost. And the people that are going there, people that live like John Lamb up in Montana, Kelly Stewart. There's people from California. From all over the country is coming out there, and others that are coming and spending a little bit of time there from different parts of the country. We even had some folks from back in Connecticut come out for their honeymoon, and that's how they spent their honeymoon, was coming out to support. Now, I've got the Real Liberty Media YouTube over there, the Bundy Ranch standoff playlist. So I think I'm up to some maybe 30 videos. Been doing live stream about outside the courtroom. I kind of figured Ryan would get out today, and that there was a lot of good coverage there too. So thanks for everybody, and I want to give a special recognition for Mrs. B. Stacy, her channel over on YouTube. So keeping up with the proceedings and all that, I would also recommend the Valley Forge Network and Jay Grady. Those are some good YouTube places over there. There's people that's doing a lot more than I am. I'm a small part, and just adding in that voice of my own here and of others that I'm connecting to make sure that it's added to the history. And
Well, right. That's that's certainly what I'm trying to do with you here now. I mean, we're down to less than 15 minutes, and I certainly want to get out as much information as possible. Have you gotten any sense from dealing with the locals? Because I'm sure you've had many conversations with just random people that are local to the area. Have you gotten any sense from them how they feel about what's going on regarding the trial, the coverage, the standoff initially, in looking back now at this point in time? Have you gotten any of that from anybody that you could represent to us?
Yes, great. From bus drivers and getting that's awesome. Getting honks from them when they were going down because they recognized me and remember me. And one young guy, young compared to his mother, he's walking his mother, and he's actually my age. And I seen him again Thursday morning on my way to the courthouse, and told him what was going on. And he said, "Yeah, I've been keeping up since I talked to you." And God bless him. He's there taking care of his mom and getting her back and forth where she needs to be. But man, props to that guy. And the Homeland Security and the police officers, they obviously know who I am. So to look over and to give a nod to them nod back. And I've given myself in effect as identifying myself in my intentions and giving notice in a sense. When I have this laminated piece of paper hung around my neck that says Real Liberty Media on it, Vince Easley, reporter. By the way, I did put black tape across where it says press pass after I was not allowed back into the court. So that's crossed out. No pass as press for me inside the courtroom. But anyways, lots of good people are stopping, they're asking questions, and other people are coming and saying, I see what's going on. I just had to come by and stop and give my support. Honk for Justice sign out. People are honking and passing all day. We're right there, 333 Las Vegas Boulevard at the federal court there on Las Vegas Boulevard, the Strip. Keep on going, and you'll be right on down to Mandalay Bay, down towards the end of the Strip and on your way out of Las Vegas. So, yeah, lots of great interaction.
Well, I'll tell you, Vince, with all the mentions that you get out to everybody else, I hope someday you'll include me in some mentions when you go to other media outlets. You make sure to remember that there's a bus driver and there's a kid taking care of his mom, and everybody's working on the press. Love it.
You know what? Let me interrupt you real quick. Matter of fact, Chuck, your name is given out there a lot. I mention you specifically in that you can find some of my words over with you, and that we've worked together for a very, very long time. And I do have a great deal of respect for you, Chuck. You're awesome. You've got a voice, man. It's perfect. Comes across really well. Really enjoy listening to you.
I do appreciate that. I was kind of joking though, but anyway. But it is great. I mean, so what you're getting is a general sense from people that they're very curious and interested, and and certainly the idea of honking for justice. Okay, cool. But I mean, in general, do you think that the community is sort of just from the general sense that you've been able to pick up, do you think that they are for the idea that these guys need to be acquitted, or do you think that they are for the idea that we need to wait for the process to play out, or you think that they're kind of, in general, what you've observed anyway, maybe these guys need to go to jail because they did something wrong? What are you getting from the locals in that way?
Yeah, there's a great understanding, I think, more and more from folks. There's still dissension, and certainly those people that don't understand, but mainly, and you get this same old failed rhetoric. And I've the connecting voices into that exploration, the buoys I've talked about, these benchmarks that I set with for determining a straight course. People like you I count on. There's other people I look at. Maxine Bernstein, she's the Oregonian, I'm sorry, live. She's doing a great job. There's a lot of people, and also other people and aspects of life where I want to look and see, do I have an even keel? So I go to all ends, as you know in your introduction. I am from the left side to the right side and all through there, and where I'm cutting right through the middle.
Well, that's for sure, man, and I appreciate you for exactly that reason. Not only the fact that you put so much time and effort into connecting people together and finding common ground between individuals so that they can make connections. I do appreciate you for all of that, but also this is really your personality, man. It's an honest thing that you're doing. It's not like you're out there doing it for fame or fortune or any of that crap. It's just you just think that this is the righteous path in your own heart and your own mind, and so I respect you for that reason. Look, we're down to less than 10 minutes at this point, and I'd like to give you the opportunity to interject anything that you think people need to know about the situation that's emerging there, because this is something I don't want to have it drop down the memory hole and have anybody forget about it, because this is the process by which change will be made. And I'm not saying that it always has to end up in a court. I'm not saying it's always got to end up in a standoff. I'm not saying that it's always got to end in conflict, but this is literally sometimes, the hard work that gets done. Some people are martyred on the rocks of the shore, you know what I mean, when they're thrown off the cliff for the sake of others. Sometimes, we talk about the tree of liberty being watered with the blood of patriots, things like that. It is part of the reality, but on occasion, it is part of the process that reveals a great deal more than even the end results and exactly how history will remember it. So, bottom line, Vince, is there anything that we've left out during this discussion, and is there anything you'd like to close with?
Yes, I'd like to say how much respect and admiration I have for the Bundys. They took a hard stand, whatever it takes. This is a slogan, and it's been shortened to a hashtag WIT. So I say keep your wit, whatever it takes, and that's what they did. They've stood there, and a lot of great men and women have come, and still coming, and stood with them. And this is such a monumental consequence that we're looking at here. It's not somebody that didn't want to pay grazing fees to run cattle where his family's been running cattle for a very long time. We see how the Department of Interior, their agencies, have come along and used trickery and legal and bringing people to charges and lawsuits and breaking people till they are able to confiscate their property. And this is not. We got to understand what the public land is and the multi-use that is involved in it. It's like a miner making a claim on the land. He owns whatever gold or silver that he digs up out of the ground. Thanks, Tony. In the same sense, there's also things that are owned. They're antecedent. They're preemptive rights. These things that are owned as property, which is the grass that grows out there, and the water. These are things that are owned and have been owned, and it's not any question whether the Bureau of Land Management has any control over it. It does not. They've gone and superseded competent courts of jurisdiction. Within Nevada, there exist agencies and a court system that would deal with any issue concerning the livestock, the brand inspector. There's courts here. So they've come in and made this claim, and this is what they're against, this competent claim of jurisdiction. They're not within that. And this has been the contention. So there has been a misconception that it was an armed standoff against federal agents. Well, I'm going to tell you that is not the case. This was a gathering of people. It turned into that where they had to stand in the gap, to stand in the middle, to say you'll not go in and just run over this family like you've been doing. You've already ran over and destroyed 50 other ranchers' families and their livelihoods. Gone. Clive and Bundy, the very last rancher standing here in southern Nevada. You can example hundreds of such cases. And this man decided no more.
Well, Vince, I'll tell you this. I think that we've covered this pretty well up to this point. But if you want to reach out to Vince on social media or elsewhere, you know what? There are ways to do that. Tell people what your Twitter handle is. I know you can find Vince Easley II on Facebook rather easily. There's also a group called Media Networking Matters, which is out there. That's Vince's group. But reallibertymedia.com obviously is one of the places where you can find some of Vince's work. But tell people how to get a hold of you on Twitter and Facebook and stuff real quick in the last 2 minutes here.
Yeah, and I'll bring you a link. I got a WordPress where I just gathered all my sites together where you can find most of where I'm at. Real Liberty Media on the YouTube channel, putting up vids over there. And Vin_RLM_radio on Twitter, and Ponder Gander. That's where my overfeed goes over there, and open it up sometimes to catch up. And
well, and here's the thing: I know people can approach you with questions if they have any other questions about what's happening and what has happened thus far. I'm very sure that you'd be more than happy to answer them or to put them in touch with the information that they're seeking, because that is the type of thing that you do. Am I right or wrong?
That's right. You know what? Earl, the dashboard outlaw there, he invited me on. I was on his show here a while back, and he said that he was honored I'd be on there. He said he was small potatoes. I said, man, I'm just a tater tot, dude. I'm nobody special. I'm less than extraordinary. I just this is something that I think is the most important thing in my life at this point in time. That and will kind of be crowning for me in a sense that. What matters, and it all equals to all of us worldwide. And this is another part of history. Might be a small part for some, but it's setting the precedent for the future.
Absolutely. And of course, Earl Conlon, the dashboard outlaw, big shout out to him, because he is supportive of this show as well. And I support Earl's work, even though it may not be the same as mine. I love the guy because he is who he is. Anyways, Vince Easley was my guest in the second hour, Jim Willie in the first hour, and the Ocelli Effect is done for this week, and in fact this Friar's Day episode, Friday as it is. Again, approach Vince Easley, and I'll include as many links as I can along with the podcast. But any questions you have, if you can't find Vince, you can also send them to me, and I'll be more than happy to pass them along. Anyways, no matter who you are, where you are, I am Ocelli merely, and you are all the effect. So be well. Take care.